Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be talking about Paperboy 64. The Paperboy series started in the arcades. It was created by Atari. It had a really cool setup for how you were supposed to play, where you actually were using a handlebar for a bike. And it was just a quarter muncher back in the day. It didn't really try to be anything else. Atari didn't try to make it into anything else. And the game ended up getting ported to everything. You could find Paperboy or a version of Paperboy on every frickin' system out there. It's kind of amazing. Just a simple game about delivering papers and going through an obstacle course at the end of your paper route. It became pretty big. It didn't really have a lot of sequels, just sort of like graphical upgrades. Once you got to the consoles, you saw them make a few tweaks to it and try to turn it into something else. In the arcades and in the consoles, it was pretty much always an isometric view, or it was always an isometric view, where you were just delivering your papers and trying to avoid obstacles as best you can. The N64 does that too. Except for it tries to go into 3D, and it really doesn't look great now, and I don't even think it looked good back then. It's just kind of an ugly looking game, to be perfectly honest with you. I think they did quite a bit with it, but this is one of the N64 games that just does not look good anymore. And I would really question if it looked good back then, too. Because you compare it to some of the other games that were out around the time, and this just looks terrible. Normally, I can kind of forgive bad graphics in some retro games, but with this one, I was just kind of like, no, it just doesn't look very good. And I can't really blame the developers on this because of just, the time that they were making this and probably whatever restraints they were under. I will say this, it's pretty easy to tell what you're not supposed to hit and where you're supposed to go in the game. They also give you the nice big arrows for when you need to throw papers at different places, and they're very nice to give you, hey, throw it in the mailbox or throw it on the front porch. The camera is pretty frickin' terrible. It's just not very easy to tell where you're trying to aim, even though they do give you a nice big arrow to point at. Hey, here's the direction you're trying to throw, and here are the papers you need to pick up, here are all the things that are going to kill you. Aside from that, though, the camera just fucks you up while you're trying to play it. The visuals are just not that great anymore, and yeah, things do at least look like what they're supposed to some extent. The trailer park looks like a trailer park, the marina looks like a marina. Everything kind of feels like it's supposed to be there, even if it looks just absolutely bizarre, and the characters just don't look anything close to reality. Okay, so the first thing I want to get into are the controls. They're pretty miserable. I really did not feel like I should have been fighting with the controls and fighting with the controller the entire time. Because I've played other games on the N64 where you don't have to deal with this horse shit, where it's a little bit easier to move things around. But with Paperboy, it felt like I was driving around with a frickin' tank that just had terrible shooting mechanics. I couldn't figure out exactly how to aim these things. Paperboy has always been a problem when you're trying to aim, because just sometimes you don't get it. But this was really bad. Like, I had no idea where these papers were going to go. And just from looking at it, you can kind of tell I was just fighting with the control stick the entire time. This might have been me just not being good at playing the game. It might have been the fact that the controls are not very good. It could have been a lot of things, but my God, was this painful trying to line up your shot. And as you can see, I just kind of ended up spraying and praying that I was going to hit something out there. More often than not, you do get it right, but you're just fighting with the controls the entire time. And yeah, it's not that great. This is a little bit of hindsight of me looking back and saying, I don't think everything in this game is very good. Or at least that's probably the way it's been portrayed while I've been talking about this, because I don't have a whole lot of positive things to say. But I do think this would have been a step in the right direction for the series, because it does kind of lead you on a bit more of an adventure. You're not just going through levels aimlessly. There is kind of a reason for why you're doing this. And that's to fight a boss at the end of this whole thing. Like, you need to get a certain number of subscribers to unlock the next level. So that's kind of fun. You do get kind of an end boss at all of this, where you unlock a creepy mansion that you have to go into, and you fight Frankenstein. That's kind of cool, and it offers something just a little bit different that you don't normally see from the arcade games that came before it. It's a pretty good idea, but as far as I can tell, they never really followed up on it, because I think this was the last Paperboy game that was really made for consoles, and Atari just kind of dropped it. This one wasn't even published by Atari. It was published by Midway, so somebody else got a hold of the license and honestly did something that Atari was just never really good at, and that was making a continuation of a game that they don't really seem to care about that much. Even though I spent just a lot of the time that I was playing this fighting with these awful controls, staring at these just really dated visuals, I still thought that there was a good game in here. There is some fun to be had, even though I don't think this is probably the version of Paperboy I would want to play again. There's some cool stuff in it, and some things that kind of, feel a little bit more interesting than they have any right to feel. But yeah, how can I put this? If they were ever going to do Paperboy again, if that Atari or anyone else was ever going to make another Paperboy, I kind of wish that they would take some of the ideas here and make it more of an adventure, give it a little bit more of a story. Because that's something that really would do something different and would do something better for Paperboy. Because it is one of those arcade games that's just kind of been lost over time. You've seen remakes of other Atari arcade games, like Gauntlet, that had a lot of different reimaginings, and I think when Midway got Gauntlet, they really turned it into something a lot better than what it was, especially in the earlier arcades. They gave it a little bit more personality. They gave it a little bit more fun. They kind of brought it up into the 90s, the way that I think a lot of arcade games should have been done. And they did a pretty good job here with Paperboy, at least trying to do something a little bit different than just graphically updating the arcade game from the 80s. Well, I don't really like this one because of the control scheme and just because of how bad the visuals were. There is some fun in it, and it's got a pretty good idea. It's got a few good ideas that I think would have helped out quite a bit and would have, given whoever took this thing up, whether it was Midway or whether Atari wanted to get it back and kind of do some more stuff with it. The ideas from this game were probably the direction that Paperboy needed to go, because it just made it into a better game than what it was, at least from an idea and a storyline standpoint. You could have done more, and I think Midway tried to do more with this. It just didn't work for me. It might have worked for other people. I never heard anyone talk about Paperboy 64, but I'm sure someone out there really, really enjoyed this when they were little. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.